Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for joining to another panel on AI ethics, global perspectives. My name is Stefan Verhulst. I'm the co-founder of GovLab and one of the course leaders of AI ethics, global perspectives. And I'm joined here with my other co-leader, Julia Stojanovic, who is a professor at NYU Tandon and many other affiliations, including the director of the Center for Responsible AI. Before I give the floor to Julia to introduce the panelists today, let me give you a 1-minute version of what we hope to do with AI Ethics Global Perspectives. As some of you obviously already know, AI Ethics Global Perspectives is an online course where we bring together a whole range of interesting faculty that have worked on AI ethics from a whole range of different perspectives. And the whole purpose of AI Ethics Global Perspectives is indeed to broaden our understanding around AI ethics, to broaden also our perspectives on how AI ethics can be addressed and can be applied in a variety of settings, whether it's in different sectors, such as, for instance, criminal justice, but also dentistry, as we already have seen before, but also from different perspectives. And so today, we will bring in also different perspectives and also emphasize different elements or even reflect on aspects that are quite often forgotten in the AI ethics context, such as, for instance, animal rights, which we also will touch upon today as well. With that, let me give the floor to Julia, who can introduce our panelists today. And we have about an hour and a half today for a broad conversation, but obviously we have a lot to share. So let's move forward, and over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Stefan. It's a pleasure to be here and welcome everybody to this panel. I'm Julia Stojanovic. I am an associate professor of computer science and engineering and of data science at New York University, where I also direct the Center for Responsible AI. And AI Ethics Global Perspectives is a very important initiative that Stefan has been leading and I have been helping with. And I'm really happy to hear what the panelists will tell us today. Today we have an excellent panel of 4 international participants. Let me start by introducing Amana Raquib. She is an assistant professor of religion and philosophy at the Institute of Business Administration in Karachi. She is the author of the book Islamic Ethics of Technology, an Objectives Approach. Amana's research looks at Islamic theology and ethics, philosophy of technology, entrepreneurship from an Islamic perspective, and the intersection of Islamic theology with the philosophy of science. Welcome, Amana.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Marta Galceran. She is a research fellow at the Global Cities Program at CIDOB and a part-time lecturer at Pompeu Fabra University and CEI International Affairs. Marta also leads the Global Observatory of Urban Artificial Intelligence. Her research focuses on city diplomacy, urban alliances, and global governance, particularly in the field of digital transitions and technological humanism. Welcome to the panel, Marta.
Thank you.
We also have with us Viviana Policena. She is a professor researcher at the Catholic University of Cordoba. Viviana is a member of the scientific committee in Journal in Itinere, the digital journal of humanistic studies at the FASTA University. Her research interests include artificial intelligence, ethics, logic, philosophy, phenomenology of physics, and sociology of sciences. She serves as a fellowships evaluator expert at the European Commission and is also a member of the Global AI Ethics Consortium. Welcome, Viviana. And last but not least, we have Yip Fai Tse. Fai is a research assistant to Professor Peter Singer at Princeton University. He is researching the impact of ethics and artificial intelligence on non-human animals. He is a 2021 Foresight Fellow in Animal Ethics for Artificial Intelligence. He was previously the China Strategy Consultant for Mercy for Animals, responsible for research and strategy for their expansion plans in China and Asia. Welcome, Fai. And with this, I hand over to Stefan to further introduce the course.
Great. Thanks so much, Julia. And as you can see, we have an amazing panel today. But before we go there, just a few housekeeping efforts. First of all, this session is recorded so that a broader audience who couldn't join today can also benefit from the learnings and the insights that will be shared today. Secondly, if you have a question, and I hope you do have many, because we hope to have this somewhat of an interactive engagement as well, please add your question to the Q&A, which is on the bottom of your screen as well. And please introduce yourself when you ask a question, but also indicate who you pose the question to, so that we have a better way of managing the answering and have potentially also more opportunities to answer other questions as well, so that we are more efficient as such. With that, I think we are ready to start. And Julia, over to you to kick us off with the first panelist as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stefan. So our first panelist is Amana Raquib. And once again, welcome, Amana, to the panel. I have the following question just to start the conversation. In your module called The Islamic Philosophy of Techno-Social Good, you explore the role of values in guiding the use of technology to achieve social good. What does Islamic philosophy tell us about the role of AI and other emerging technologies in improving human life?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, in the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful. So the thesis that I have often talked about in my work, general work on technology as well as AI, is actually the cultivation of virtuous individuals and virtuous societies on the whole, right? And there are some basic principles and Islamic guidelines with respect to those that could actually steer the society towards those goals. And I have often emphasized that instead of looking at individual technologies and their specific consequences, we need to have a holistic assessment of how it affects individuals, communities, not only in terms of their material and physical well-being. Of course, that's part of the understanding, but also their moral, spiritual upliftment and how it actually serves those broader and greater objectives of preservation of religion, life, raising family, intellect, those things. And this broader framework actually can be used to assess individual technologies, but in conjunction with other technologies and the whole social technical system and the cultural repercussions, both their short-term and the long-term. And one thing I'd like to add is that when you merely use a consequentialist approach or a consequentialist narrative, it's often problematic to look too forward into the future and know. I mean, so for instance, 20 years back, none of us could actually have known exactly the kind of things we're experiencing today, despite many predictions and sci-fi things that were there. But when we have those essential values that pertain to essential human nature, that can be used as the springboard to evaluate especially the emerging technologies that have immense potential, the ones that we are experiencing today, I think. And then I'm happy to answer anything else that you would like to know.
That's great. Thank you for this answer. I have another question to follow up, and that is that you advocate for the cultivation of diverse religious and secular virtues to promote the ethical use of AI. What are some steps that we can take to foster this exchange of ideas?
Yes, because as a Muslim participant in this conversation, I think that we can actually get down to some some common understandings of a good life, and actually I've been working towards that. So, for instance, the AI ethics research that I did as part of a grant that I received, it culminated in a paper that's like on AI and virtue ethics, Islamic virtue ethics. But the reason we focused on virtue is primarily that we have that intersection of various religious and non-religious cultures, the way virtue is understood and practiced and has been practiced over centuries, right? So this idea of universality, and which is actually part of the Islamic tradition, to look at the universal aspect of things. So again, because and also because as as being part of a culture and a society where technology is usually handed down, and I see the Muslims as not being at the ends of where things are designed. We just receive, and the society, the world is already shaped in a certain way and kind of forced to have those. We don't choose, right? So so in that sense, again, talking to people who belong to places where they're the designing end, and talking about those common values where it's easier to reach agreement on a common human good. Yeah.
Great. Let me ask a follow-up question. I wonder if you have specific examples in mind where you think that this interplay between different religious points of view and secular virtues has actually changed the way that we either develop or use technology, and particularly AI. Is there anything specific that comes to mind?
Yeah, so for instance, this some time back I wrote this article on human sentience, and then how people so this very understanding that we need to have a real robust human community for people to have that emotional support and understanding, and this idea of human consciousness. This is very relevant. For instance, these days people are very excited about those AI applications, like where we have chatbots. And then, so the question that we would have is not, how far they can actually copy and emulate human beings. The question that most of us belonging from different ethical traditions and religious traditions would agree upon is the fact that why are people so lonely that they need to have, they don't have human companions and friends and neighbors and relatives to actually talk to and love, and so instead they are kind of venting out their emotions in front of a chatbot, and want that chatbot to behave in certain ways to kind of redress whatever their loneliness or their at the level of feeling. So those are some more fundamental questions that should shape our conversation, and we cannot just stay focused on merely just this X technology and what harm and what good it is producing and is capable of producing. So again, so people are talking about things like people becoming unemployed, but even from looking from an Islamic perspective, employment or unemployment is not the final ultimate question. So again, when we are talking about good life, it's more about, even for instance, within the Islamic system of life that we call the deen, wealth, again, or employment or a career is not an end in itself, right? It's just a means to its a meaningful purpose of life. So those very those deeper questions are related to the development and design of technologies, and what kind of a society and what kind of individuals are envisioned when these things are developed. And I'm not talking about the unintentional consequences or unintended consequences, but the ones that are very much intended. And I've often problematized this fact that often at times, if it's just experimental, then that's also problematic from a value perspective. That you're not thinking, you're just kind of experimenting with human societies. And so yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Amana. I'd like to ask if any of the panelists would like to follow up, either with your own thoughts or ask a follow-up question to Amana, and we will get to questions from the audience after the main body of the panel.
Yeah, I have a question, Amana, is I think super interesting. And so the question then is, are there ways that you can steer the development of technology and AI according to the deeper, as you rightly said, the more profound kind of questions? And is there a way to not just have, as you said, technology be done to you, but actually make sure that technology serves those broader universal kind of goals of what a good life is? And how would one go about this?
Yeah, so talking from an Islamic perspective, I would say that, yes, we know how we want to steer technology and in what direction and toward which goals. So there are some broader principles, but then there are some very specific ones as well. And that's actually the beauty of the Islamic system, whereby, so for instance, this idea of community building and having compassion. So again, there are things that in order to fulfill certain obligations as a believing person, you have to have a nice, real, not just virtual relationship with your neighbors, with your family, visiting the sick, going and taking care of them. That's part of faith, and that's requirement of faith, which is and if we think that the technologies would compromise that and would provide, let's say, to have a situation where you have a virtual replacement of that. So is that acceptable, right? A sort of disembodied relationship, because it's not the same, it's the quality. Or for instance, let's say you're saying that a machine could more efficiently take care of someone, right? But then this very idea of sentience and this very idea of moral agency, right? So if I'm helping out my parents, or I hire a mechanical service for that, there's this whole idea of my moral agency and what I choose to do. So those things are what actually guide the development. But again, unfortunately, these things are so commercially oriented and steered that people just jump on board and see there's something that we can use in our businesses, and then once it kicks off, there's no point of return.
Wonderful. Any questions or comments from anybody else on the panel? If not, then let's move to the next panelist. Yes, so over to you, Stefan.
Yeah, let's build
Amana.
and yeah, thanks so much, Amana. And let's build upon some of that as well, because I think what Amana was referring to is that there's no shortage of experimentation, and clearly AI is experimented a lot within cities, and that's the focus of Marta. And so, Marta, you've done a lot of work on how do you approach the use of AI within cities from an ethical point of view, or from a digital even rights point of view. And so from your perspective, what's the biggest challenge that exists as we see a rapid uptake of AI within cities? What's the biggest challenge, and potentially even the biggest opportunity? Because obviously there might also be opportunities there as well. But from an ethical point of view, what do you think are the issues that we should be aware of?
Great. Well, thank you, Stefan. So as you mentioned, cities worldwide are increasingly adopting AI to support public administration, to support all sorts of services, and this refers to transport and environment, culture. I mean, almost AI is being deployed or used as a tool to offer innovative services in almost all sectors. And there's huge potential here, right? So you have a more refined diagnosis of city problems. You can gather evidence to evaluate the impact of those public policies or public services. You can automate decisions, and this certainly increases efficiency and reduces costs of public administrations. Or you can simply enable more innovative public services that allow you to offer services that you haven't thought before. Yet, as you mentioned, there are important drawbacks, important concerns, because we already know that with AI comes important biases and inequalities that are being exacerbated. AI can fail. This means that we cannot think of the deployment of these technologies in cities without thinking about the regulation of these technologies, right? So we need to establish the right procedures, the right normative frameworks to safeguard fundamental rights, to safeguard digital rights also in cities. So that's a key challenge, particularly because cities are doing that. Some cities are doing that, not all of them, but they're doing that in a vacuum, in sort of a vacuum, because there is like we are in a context of fragmented AI regulation, so we don't have clear frameworks that could inform those efforts by cities. Interestingly, there's a lot of initiative coming, right? So regulation from the bottom up, I would say, partly because also it's in cities where you see clearly the impact of the use of those technologies. So perhaps because the impact is more clearly seen, the need to regulate that or to establish limits or to question whether they should be limits, it's also more clear. With that, there are some cities that have drafted some AI governance strategies or frameworks. They include some set of ethical principles that they can be different from one city to another, but some examples are fairness and non-discrimination, transparency and openness, safety and cybersecurity, privacy protection, sustainability or accountability. Now, those are principles that they look very nice on paper, and most AI governance strategies, like the one that Barcelona has, like the one that New York has, Amsterdam or Buenos Aires, they include those principles, but then you go to those cities and ask, okay, so what do you mean by transparency, or what do you mean by accountability? And you see there's a key challenge here on how to operationalize those principles, right? So how those cities say, okay, yeah, I want to have an accountable AI system, yes, but how you do that? Other than saying that, yes, we need to aim for accountability. So here there's a key challenge to move from definitions or to commitments to actual enforcement, right? So we need to be imaginative. We need to try to collect best practice on how to advance those ethical principles. And as I was saying, that's a key challenge, right? How are cities doing that, right? So they have this challenge. One very traditional way of doing that is by partnering with other cities. And here city networks are a very useful tool. Here, I would like to point to the amazing work that the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights is doing. This is an alliance of cities that was established in 2018 by the cities of Barcelona, Amsterdam, and New York, but today gathers more than 55 cities around the world. And one of the projects that this coalition is doing, it's a project that we are leading from CIDOB, is precisely this global observatory of urban artificial intelligence. And what we are doing is try precisely to sort of like match those principles with specific practices that could inform, that could provide some guidance to the cities to know exactly how to implement transparent, accountable, safe AI systems. Another important challenge is that most cities, they have a limited capacity to develop their own AI systems. No? So there is, most cities, they don't have an in-house capacity to do that. They must contract these technologies and services to private companies, and this creates sort of like an imbalanced relation between the public and the private and the public administration. And it's not that the private sector is not interested in ethical AI principles. Actually, Microsoft has its own AI ethical principles, Amazon as well. The problem is whether the private sector and cities speak the same language when they refer to ethical principles. So this is an important challenge related to public-private governance of these solutions. Again, it's not only a challenge. Let's look now to some solutions. Here, one powerful tool is public procurement. Public procurement is a super important and very useful tool because, for instance, you could include some digital rights clauses in the tendering processes that the cities are doing. And in this way, they sort of like establish a same common understanding of what they mean when they speak the language of accountability, transparency, etc. And here, I would also like to mention one specific practice. Barcelona has just, and I'm speaking now from Barcelona, so that's also the city I know the most, but they've been just releasing a document that they define the mechanisms for safeguarding the rights associated with each stage of the tendering and implementation of all those algorithmic systems used by Barcelona City Council. And actually, this protocol is based also on the well, there is an ongoing process to pass an AI Act at the EU level. So this document is also based, or it takes into consideration the European context. It's certainly a pioneering document. I invite you to check it out in the website of the Barcelona City Council. But it's an example that cities can do to overcome this challenge.
Great, super interesting, and yeah, I recommend everyone to look at the coalition's effort there to establish those ethical principles. But the whole idea behind discourse is really to reflect on global perspectives and to what extent, of course, are certain perspectives more pronounced and more present than other perspectives. And so, especially question to you, Marta, a lot of the discussions about AI ethical principles happen among the kind of the usual advanced kind of cities, right? So you mentioned Barcelona has been a pioneer on that for a long time. Amsterdam, you have Copenhagen, Helsinki, then you have New York, and so on. And so interesting that you also mentioned Buenos Aires, for instance, and other cities as well. So how do you see this kind of global approach, and whether you feel there is a need for also taking into account cities from the so-called global south and how they anyway approach AI, whether they have different concerns, especially you mentioned from a capacity point of view, but also other, anyway, like as Amana was said, even other kind of belief systems that that they might want to integrate in their approaches as it relates to AI within their cities. And so eager to hear from you. Do you see that those tensions emerge? Do you see that there is some kind of a need to actually have a more global approach? So yeah, I wonder how, given the fact that you have a global coalition, how does that play out?
That's a crucial point, Stefan. Also, because actually, if you look at the membership of the Cities Coalition for Digital Rights, almost 90% of the cities are from Europe and United States, and actually roughly 60% are from Europe. So it's basically a global north coalition. Actually, this is a debate that is often being taken within the coalition, like how to expand the geographical reach. So it's something that it's being taken into consideration. And from the point of view of research, we have this debate as well. If you look, one of the tools we have at the Global Observatory, we are mapping those best practices that I just mentioned a couple of them today. But when you look at the map, it's where it's the global south. We have Buenos Aires, we have in Brazil, there are also some nice experiences. There are some nice experiences also in Mexico, but we have difficulties to access this knowledge. Perhaps it's less readily available, perhaps we have less context. Even with that, we are establishing ways to sort of like overcome that. For instance, we are working very closely with UN Habitat and see if we can bring, for instance, the discussion of AI within African cities, because this is something, there is an ongoing and strong development of AI in many African cities. At least externally, or it's this ethical perspective, as far as we could see, has not been explicitly made. It's not something that, but that it's not explicit doesn't mean that it's not being taken into consideration, right? So I think it's a key question, because from the moment, yes, it's a debate, those on but not only on ethical artificial intelligence. This happens also in the debate about digital rights. I would say still today, it's a conversation very much dominated by the global north.
Great. Well, we will come back to that. And again, anyone who has a question or suggestion or comment, feel free to add it to the Q&A. But thanks so much, Marta, for that. And so over to you, Julia and Viviana.
Great. Thank you, Stefan. Welcome once again, Viviana. And we will now discuss your very interesting module called Global Pact, Birth and Organization of Territories. And I understand that you would perhaps like to respond in Spanish, and then Marta volunteered to translate, right? So let's do it that way. So my first question to you is the following. One of the central ideas of your module is the phenomenological paradigm. What is the role of this paradigm in establishing a global pact to govern the use of technology? And perhaps you could also just give us the gist of what that paradigm entails. You're muted, Viviana.
Estás muteada. Yeah.
I'm going to start with a brief introduction to the central notions of the phenomenological paradigm. The term phenomenology derived from the Greek phenomenon, and logo, study or science. Phenomenology is the study of the phenomenon or phenomenon. Phenomenon has its origin in the grammatical particle phos, which means light. The phenomenon is what is given to light. The appearance of what of show. It is different paradigm from the standard paradigm. The phenomenological method consists of two general steps. The first step is that of the epoche. The epoche is the suspension of the prechangement. It implies suspending for a black ring. All previous changement, or in order to the thing itself. It does not mean denial, but suspension. The second step characterized by the positive aspect. In the reduction is the right direction. Return to the original scope. Redirect the phenomena to the origin where they appear. The phenomenological act contains multiple episodes related to signification, enunciation, expression. It encompasses acts of language, logical acts, cultural acts, and the show. It does not demonstrate inaccessible phenomenon. Phenomenology review what we call phenomena. It operates a reduction of the phenomena from which access to these phenomena is possible. It maintains that the subject is construed by the phenomena that come to him as manifestation of events. This leads us to think about the phenomenon from new angles. It calls us to consider the existence of a sublime environment made of phenomena that escape the unusual phenomenologizations. It is an environment that is shown to the connected and interacting with us. En francés, c'est une grande différence entre le paradigme the phenomenological and the paradigm standard. From phenomenology, the distinction between subject and object is found again, and a bridge is built between theory, experiment, and phenomena, concept, meaning, and effect, subject, object, and appearance. Go beyond the standard model. The notion of building a reality as a fabric arises between the subject and the phenomena of nature, a reality that weaves the interaction between subject, object, from which they do not exist separability, but for unit. Within the unit, the phenomenological paradigm with how human, natural phenomena and technology are related to each other within a new model that requires a new relationship marked by trust. We are facing new way of being in the world with extending space as a result of the digital expanding reality. This extended space reconsidered to subject-object relationship.
Okay, thank you very much for this answer. I have another question for you, and if I may suggest, perhaps if you would respond in Spanish, and then Marta would translate.
Marta, lo que quiero decir es que el problema acerca de la separación entre la naturaleza y el humano surgió con el paradigma que tenemos actual, con el paradigma estándar de la ciencia.
A ver, espera. What Viviana meant to say is that the problem that we have today with the separation between the human and nature, it's a problem that arises within the current scientific paradigm.
Arribó el tema de lo digital de una manera abrupta, la inteligencia artificial, el Big Data, y de repente queremos regular desde un paradigma que sigue separando la naturaleza, a la cual hemos maltratado. Queremos solucionar desde ese paradigma y queremos regular nuestras creaciones, nuestras innovaciones e incorporar a la naturaleza. Pero desde el viejo paradigma, pero todo desde el viejo paradigma siempre.
So, with the emergence of the digital, of the AI, of big data, the problem is that we want to regulate all those human creations, but using the old paradigm, using a paradigm that separates nature from the human. And we need to take into consideration, in addition, that we are, as humans, we are not treating nature particularly well. So this is a problem.
Okay, so let me just ask a follow-up question, just in the interest of time. And that is, this clearly is a problem, right? And so then there is a particular approach that might lead us to a solution that you, Viviana, propose in your module. And that is the adoption of a global pact that would transform many different aspects of our world and our lives. If possible, if you could just say, using an example perhaps, what might be some of the benefits of this global pact in terms of ethical and sustainable use of technology.
¿Cuáles serían los beneficios de este pacto global como solución que usted propone?
Sí. Primero, antes de lograr, la elaboración del pacto global es consecuencia del cambio de paradigma. Eso hay que tenerlo claro. Si no cambiamos el paradigma, no podemos hacer el pacto global.
The first thing is that if we don't change the paradigm from the old to the new one, we cannot do any global pact. So first point, change the paradigm.
El pacto global traerá enormes beneficios, porque primero nos vamos a poder regular nosotros como seres humanos y luego podremos hacer regulaciones de nuestras innovaciones.
So some of the benefits that this global pact will bring is that first, we will be able to self-regulate as humans. And the second one is that we will be able to regulate those human creations.
Con el pacto vamos a poder eliminar diferencias y muchas divisiones que hasta ahora no han traído grandes beneficios para todos los ciudadanos del mundo, solamente ha traído beneficios para una parte.
So with this global pact, we'll be able to overcome differences and divisions that we are experiencing, and that, of course, they are not bringing us benefits.
Por eso es que a través del pacto vamos a poder organizar y dar nacimiento a nuevos territorios, que ya no serán las mismas naciones que ahora. Lo que nosotros estamos viviendo ahora nació hace mucho tiempo, en otra época. Las naciones, así como las conocemos, con sus estados y con su política, nació hace mucho tiempo, en otra época. Esa época terminó.
So through the pact, we'll be able to organize and enable new territories. And what also Viviana says, that we need to take into consideration that the nations, like territories as we have them today, is something that was created long time ago. So perhaps it's from another time, not the time that we are experiencing today. Therefore, the need to create new territories or think about new territories.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm gonna just ask us that we move on to the next panelist for in the interest of time, but for the discussion that we will have afterwards, it would be great to hear a specific example of what such a pact would bring when it comes to new technology and AI. And Amana, I'm going to delay your question until later because we're a little bit over time already, but we will get back to that. Over to you, Stefan.
Yeah, and I do want to make sure that Fai also has a moment to speak. And again, thanks so much for your patience, Fai. It's always hard to be the last in the line. And we will come back to the Global Pact and Amana. We will make sure that we kick off the Q&A with your reflections as well. But I thought that actually the interventions by Viviana really were interesting to set also the stage for you, Fai, because what you have been also advocating for is actually not only about a global pact from, anyway, a new kind of cross-border perspective, but also not just a pact, of course, but also the realization that non-human animals are largely absent from the discussion as it relates to AI ethics. And so eager to hear from you, Fai, on what that means, what your observations are, and then subsequently how we go about this. And that might also be then food for conversation with even Viviana on, what role do non-human animals play in a global pact, as well as it relates to this redefining between nature and humans, for instance, as well. Over to you, Fai.
So I would like to give a very brief introduction of my research focus. So basically, we looked at a lot of AI principles or AI ethics courses, and in basically virtually none of them, not literally, we did find a few exceptions in, for example, the University of Montreal in Canada, or EU in a certain document. But besides that, largely overlooked the issue whether AI impacts animals. And our research finds that AI does impact non-human animals. And if there are impacts on non-human animals, especially non-human animals that are proven to be sentient and have the capability to have experiences such as pain or pleasure or interests, then this kind of impact on them matters, ethically speaking. And it is imperative that, or it is an obligation that we find out, identify these impacts, and then try to reduce the harm or maybe even bring benefits to them. So I can give some examples of some of the potential harms AI systems or AI related systems might have on non-human animals. So you have self-driving cars. So obviously self-driving cars could kill people, and that's a big discussion in the field of AI ethics. But obviously cars also kill non-human animals too. So how the AI algorithm, so when it comes to the time when most human drivers hand over the job to AI systems, like how does these AI systems detect or avoid the animals is an ethical question, for example. Or there are some companies looking to use AI controlled drones to identify so-called pest animals and try to kill them. And then there you have the question of whether this application is ethically problematic. Or we argue, even if you accept that, okay, we should use this kind of drones to inevitably kill some animals, there could be less humane or more humane ways of doing so. And also you have AI that are now being used in factory farms. So that is a big ethical question, which I believe I could not have the time to expand on. So these are the potential harms or impacts on non-human animals you have with AI systems. And obviously you could have benefits too, but I'm gonna have time to talk about that now.
Great, thanks so much, Faye. And so And I liked a lot the examples that you gave, because it makes it real, and also actually indeed identifies that there's basically a gap in our exploration, right? And given the focus on humans, but so what would that, for instance, mean in a practical point of view? I mean, you already mentioned one practical aspect would be if you design some kind of sensors with regard to self-driving cars, that it also would take into account, of course, identifying animals, for instance, which might be smaller as well than what humans might be detected, for instance. But what would be other kind of steps from your point of view on making this more integrated in the current debate, but also practical?
I think I would encourage everyone to look at it from a very broad and general perspective. I think what is generally missing is the knowledge that AI could even impact animals. I was surprising a lot of people by just telling them that, hey, what about non-human animals? And oh, I never thought about that. Even though it actually appeared to be quite obvious to me, but I got a lot of feedback that my comment or our paper talking about AI ethics and animals was surprising to them. So I guess spreading the word is important. So bring it to AI ethics courses or events like this is important. And I would like to have more people to write paper on this topic. And also, I think there's a need to maybe update some of the AI ethics principles, either written by state or city governments, or by companies, or by universities. I think there's a need to expand our moral circle a little bit, and not just say AI for humans or AI for humanity or AI for society, which presumably mean human society. I think there's a need to broaden it to say AI for all sentient beings, or if you would like to be saying many words, you can say AI for humans and other non-human entities such as non-human animals. And as far as I know now, the only AI principle that includes all sentient beings is the one by University of Montreal in Canada. And I would like to encourage more organizations or governments to include, to broaden this scope. So that's the most important thing.
That's great. So how does this, so one area that we do some work on is around this concept of One Health, which is, of course, how animal health impacts human health and vice versa, and impacts environmental health, right? So ultimately, I think they are very closely related. So a question to you, Faye, and then we should, Julia, open it up for a broader conversation, perhaps amongst the panel as well, because a lot of it is actually cross the topics here. But do you also feel that, anyway, it should also be actually not just human or animals, let's say non-human and human, but also the environmental kind of aspects, and that actually we should have a broader conversation where environment, planetary health, or planetary well-being, animal human well-being should be taken together when we focus on AI ethics. And perhaps that's a question that has a natural answer, but wonder how you go about that, Faye.
Sure. So a quick disclaimer about my ethical thought or ethical thinking. So I'm roughly a utilitarian. So that means I mostly look at the question of what is ethical or not ethical from the perspective of whether the actions, or whether in the case of AI ethics, whether development of AI or the application of AI brings about more suffering than the good, or the reverse. And we utilitarians usually claim that we have less reasons to care about non-sentient entities, or seemingly non-sentient entities, such as natural entities like rivers, mountains, or the ecosystems. So we naturally, because of our ethical belief, care more about sentient beings such as humans, or non-human animals. But I do think we have other reasons to care about non-sentient entities, or so we believe in non-sentient entities, because there are obviously sentient beings who care about these non-sentient entities. And I think it's by virtue that some sentient beings, such as humans or some non-human animals, but depending on those environment or ecosystems, those are actually also valuable. But I do admit that I see those non-sentient entities as more instrumentally good or important than intrinsically good. So I think, but to your point of One Health, I think it's one approach that might be moving one step closer to looking at things broader than just human beings. But to be honest, I think notions like One Health or like I have forgotten names of similar notions, but yeah, I think these notions might not be tackling the question right on, that we need to broaden our ethical concern to all sentient beings, so I believe. Because when you look at it at a systematic level, focus too much on the systematic level, we often forget about the individuals who have everyday, every second experience in themselves. And I do believe that might be missing in a lot of fields that rely a lot on the conversations like ecosystems or conservation. They do seem to a lot of times miss out on, okay, what happens to the individuals? So for example, when you try to preserve a wetland, a big area, what actually happens to the non-human animals and sometimes humans inside that area? I think that's quite a lot of times missing, and I would like us to think about whether we should all think more about the experiences going on in there.
Awesome. Julia.
Yeah, so I'd like to actually respond to this point a bit, and also then bring in the conversation that one of the participants asked already in the Q&A. And this is Sean's question, which was a question to Amana, and I would like to ask it more broadly. Both religion and secularism often stand in stark contrast. How do you reconcile conflicting religious and secularist virtues? And to make this a little bit broader, I think all panelists could respond to whether or not your lens is a utilitarian one and you look at benefits and harms, or if your lens is one that starts with virtues and from them derives some of the principles and how you operationalize these principles in the ethical design of technology. Let's say there are always going to be trade-offs, right? So how do you think about those trade-offs in your specific contexts between religious and secular views, or between what may be a benefit to some but a harm to others in the utilitarian view? So maybe we can go to Amana and then to Fai after that, and then to others.
Yeah, thank you. So I would actually kind of have a brief comment on each participant's ideas to actually show the breadth, and that will also partially answer the question that was posed to me, that despite these views coming from mostly from non-religious perspective, I can see so many areas, nodes and points of intersection with each one of them. So for instance, Viviana was talking about that we cannot have those national borders anymore, so we are talking to each other. This this is a borderless community that we are part of. And so again, we need to come out of those, imposed categories and borders and separations, because these are essentially questions that are open to all of us as humans. And if I look at the Islamic tradition, this idea of a universal humanity, it's so much there. And this idea of geographical boundaries, it's not really in it, so it has to be, those are just managerial boundaries and nothing else. And, so that kind of a thing that, all human humanity has this, this essential mandate, as trustee of the planet. And this goes to this idea of animals and environment that Fai was talking about. So again, in Islam, not only that the inanimate objects like the mountains and the trees and the rivers, they are God conscious, but also they are signs of God, including animals, and the Islamic tradition has so much to say on animals and animal welfare. So all of that I see, to be kind of having a dialogue with the Islamic tradition, which kind of answers this question of how, this religious perspective can engage with the secular perspectives, and then on. And even cities. So, so if you look at the traditional Islamic cities in Northern Africa and other places, the degree of sustainability and sociability that they had, so, the way the architecture and everything reinforced the community building. So that kind of intersects with Marta's idea of, sustainable cities. So all of that I see as part of a very holistic view. And then regarding virtues versus consequentialism, so in my work, I've tried to kind of reconcile those tensions. So again, as I mentioned earlier, that the Islamic view is not completely consequentialist, but nevertheless, of course, the consequences are important. But then the way the consequences are to be evaluated and appraised, that's important, because again, when we say benefit or pleasure or happiness, that's, it could mean so many things for so many people, but we need to have something more objective on what's harm and what's benefit. And then if you look at most of the critical literature on technology that I have learned a lot from various traditions, philosophical and religious, there's like a lot of agreement on what is causing harm, actually more agreement on what is causing harm than what could produce good, perhaps. And of course, we can actually do away with that part if there's, we can begin with the part where there's more agreement, and at least we can get rid of that harm. And then again, within Islam, it's like the individual and society, they're enmeshed. So again, individual virtue should lead to societal good, and vice versa. That society should be shaped so as to encourage and imbibe those virtues and nurture those virtues. So it goes both ways. Thank you.
And Faye, perhaps you would want to respond as well. Yeah.
Yeah. In response to this question, I would like to just point everyone to a philosophical concept called moral uncertainty. So moral uncertainty is the topic of philosophical investigation, trying to deal with what if we are uncertain about what moral theories are correct, or what moral theories we consider this to be correct. So as using myself as an example, the way I use this concept is I would like to imagine myself as probably 90% certain that I'm a utilitarian, then I'm 10% leaving that 10% for some other moral theories. That's heavily utilitarian, but that's usually not what you hear from most utilitarians who will claim that utilitarianism is 100% correct. Well, actually, in the history of moral philosophy, most people just go by 100% certain about their own preferred moral theory. But there's a new concept, new investigation in moral uncertainty, which I encourage everyone to Google that. I actually type them out to make sure that you are right about the words. So this is the way I deal with the conflict of different moral theories. So if you want a daily life example, if utilitarianism say nothing about certain action I'm about to do, then that 10% actually dominate my choice, because utilitarianism have no guiding power in whether I don't know, will cross the road faster or slower. I'm not talking about breaking. Okay, let's talk about breaking the law. Maybe utilitarianism isn't really informative when breaking the law has no real consequence. But should I break the law? Because some other moral theories might say you shouldn't do that. Then maybe that part actually dominates my thinking. So that's how I use the framework more uncertainty. So that's my take. I have some other takes on the conflict of moral theories, but that's the main conceptual tool I'll use when there are conflicting moral theories.
Thank you. And I also pasted the link to our take, the take of Fala Arif Khan, Mona Sloan, and me, who co-authored the comic book series. And there's a volume there that critiques utilitarianism, specifically saying that you really cannot encode things in a number. So please take a look.
Oh, by the way, on this, by saying that I am a utilitarian, I'm actually not supporting that we should build utilitarian AI or utilitarian robots. That's actually not my view. My current view on machine ethics is that we should probably build robots or AI that are virtuous rather than utilitarian. That's a strange point to say for utilitarian, maybe surprising for you, but that's at least my current view. Yeah, it's probably hard to program the right utilitarian calculus. I think this thing might at the moment stay for humans, not for the robots or AI, just to clarify.
Thank you for that. I wonder, Marta and Viviana, if you have any comments on this conversation, and then we should go to the other questions and Q&A. Yeah.
Well, to be honest, this conversation is quite far away from my my regular field of work, so I don't have a particularly view on that, to be honest.
But I do want to get Marta about, and sorry for, but I kind of liked Amana's also intervention about how a city is from an architectural point of view and infrastructural point of view, how it is designed impacts ultimately the well-being of a city. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder whether that kind of more place-based kind of approaches are part of also the kind of coalition thinking about AI, and to what extent AI can contribute or harm even the kind of approach on how one moves around or goes around in a city. And it goes back to I think also some of Viviana's is as far as I understand Viviana's point is that we actually cross borders, but also transcend space to a large extent. And the question is, to what extent does that also impact cities? If that's a question that you're willing to answer, otherwise, sorry for imposing.
Yeah. No, on that, I think on how cities are designed, for me, and that the idea is related on how we're using artificial intelligence tools, that sometimes they are automating decisions, they are helping make decisions. But we need to take into consideration that ultimately decisions about how to make cities are political. So we cannot, I used to say that we can have data-informed decisions, but not data-driven decisions. So here I see a problem if we leave to artificial, even if we have the perfect AI architectures that are unbiased, and still I think we need humans to think and to make political decisions on how cities should be built, should be organized, because this has tremendous consequences on the city, on people living in cities. And here there are different models. I mean, and this happens also with this idea of sustainability. We need to be careful about these new paradigms or these new norms on how all cities around the world should be. And we have these smart cities, sustainable cities, walkable. I mean, we need to problematize also these concepts, and also problematize how the models behind these concepts, how we arrive to these ideas, and we need to also be careful on having AI standardizing the way we think about cities. I don't know if your question was more or less on that direction, but that's my take here.
No, absolutely, and it's fascinating. So, very broad and interesting topic. But Julia, back to you to facilitate this here. And I think Amanda has her hand up as well. And then Viviana, I would love to get your take as well. But
that's right. Yeah. So let's go to Amana. Amana, what were your thoughts on this?
Thank you. I wanted to add that to what Martha said regarding cities and different cities having their own dynamics, and looking at the Islamic history. One thing that one notices is that there was not just one universal model that was imposed, and every city was sustainable in its own way. The kind of culture they had, the kind of geography, the kind of resources they had, and it wasn't like one fit for all. But despite that, the dynamic nature of it, each city was sustainable and lively in its and community oriented in its own way, according to the tastes and the culture of the people there, which is pretty much homogenized by these technologies. And
I agree here. We need to be careful about this homogenization, because also sometimes if we focus too much on these ideas of having green cities, sustainable cities, or having digital at the center of many city elements, without taking into consideration also sometimes the social element of that. I mean, this is clearly also an emerging conversation. Sometimes some actions that make a city on paper more sustainable, more green, more at the same time make it more unequal, more exclusive, more. So all these paradigms need to be questioned all the time. And when you have technology helping move through these new normals, this is also a problem. If we don't problematize it, if we don't question that.
So just picking up on a lot of those discussions here about homogenization and context specific and fit for purpose, wonder, Viviana, how that fits with a global pact. And quite often the discussion about we need to do this globally means quite often towards more homogenization than actually taking into account indeed different needs and different contextual aspects. And so I wonder how that plays out in your thinking, or whether anyway you feel like global also allows for diversity.
¿Hasta qué punto, Viviana, ese pacto global no es una herramienta muy homogeneizadora, en el sentido de que lo global, ¿no?, a veces puede tapar la diversidad? ¿O hasta qué punto este pacto global que usted propone pues puede también permitir diversidad?
Es justamente a la inversa. El pacto global es lo que va a permitir que las minorías y los países que aún no han podido participar de las tecnologías y de los avances puedan hacerlo. Hay muchos países que están afuera todavía.
Actually, what Viviana says is that it works the other way around. What this global pact would allow is to have those countries that have not been able to benefit from this technological development to partake or to be included in this global conversation. So by including, it's my guessing, this countries that have not been included yet, actually what you're doing is creating a more diverse global.
Por eso no tenemos que dejar engañar por la palabra global. No tiene que ver con globalización ni nada de lo que estamos considerando o de lo que se cree.
So in this sense, the word global might be misleading. So we don't need to equate global with homogeneous. We need to be very careful about the meanings that we are attributing to the word global or globalization.
Justamente, que sea global significa que pueden incluirse todos los que aún no están incluidos, pero para eso hay que hacer una nueva organización de territorios.
Actually, global should mean inclusive, that we have all entities represented, but this also means having or moving towards a new distribution, creation, architectures of territories.
Great.
Thanks.
Por ejemplo, uno de los beneficios sería el tema de la inmigración. Ese es un gran beneficio. Ya no sería necesaria la inmigración, las oleadas de inmigración hacia países más ricos.
One specific example of a benefit of having this global pact is that it will help tackle migration. So you wouldn't need to have, or you would avoid having these migration waves from like citizens or people moving towards countries with better opportunities, more technological access, etc.
Si nos organizamos de otra manera en otros territorios que puedan involucrar a varios países a la vez y no la división que hoy tenemos, con un consejo del mundo y con cada representante de ese territorio, el Consejo del Mundo va a actuar sobre cada territorio para beneficiar y buscar el bien común y para que la gente no se tenga que movilizar y se produzcan estas oleadas inmigratorias buscando mejor calidad de vida.
So with this new paradigm with different territories, you would have like a global council where those new territories or regions would be represented. And this way you were able to solve these issues and you wouldn't have these migration waves. That's what I understood.
Great. And yeah, I mean, again, too rich a topic to unfortunately deconstruct on this short period, but I think I do want to make sure that we also address the question that James had in the Q&A, which, as I understand it, is really about agency and to what extent AI enables or takes away some kind of human agency in how decisions are made. And wonder, and again, I'm just trying to shorten and not fully read the question, but wonder whether anyone wants to reflect on that and how that fits. And perhaps Amana, wonder how that fits within your work on agency and to what extent AI enables or takes away some kind of decision agency.
Thank you.
And then we should go around the room to close the session as well. Over to you, Amana.
Thank you. I haven't understood the question completely, but if the person's there, can they elaborate a bit on exactly, you know, with some example of what they mean by, you know, AI assisted human behavior? Because it could mean a number of things. I'm not really sure. A bit, as far as I've understood it, I mean, adding to human dilemmas, for instance. So being a professor, I see, you know, a lot of potential for, you know, fraud and all of that using the AI. And that actually puts a lot of more moral responsibility on, let's say, the students, the people who are using it for cheating on, let's say, others. I mean, yeah, so my take on it generally is that technologies actually either add to the moral responsibility, the number of choices that they and the opportunities and the choices they make possible, so it adds to the moral burden, and sometimes the moral dilemmas that were already there even in the pre-technological times, they are sometimes intensified. And then on a more pragmatic, on a practical level, there's like so many choices that one has to make. It just gets out of hand, and because it's so exhausting, then you kind of think that, you know, it's no longer doable, and that actually takes away your moral agency. And also in a society, as I said earlier, where you know, the society is shaped already, and then you're kind of bound to live in a certain way, to even to even survive. So for instance, if I don't use a lot of technology, I have to pay price for that. Even my social connections, they cost me those. So all of that, yes. So a lot of that has to be thought of before those things are sent out to be embedded within the human societies, because once that's done, so many things are already integrated that it's very difficult to now pull them back, because the society, so many jobs, so many tasks, the way families live, it's now so dependent on those networks and those infrastructures. So a lot of people, when they're told that how much AI destroys the environment, for instance, the data center, their energy consumption, all of that, they would say, yes, yes, that's not good. But can we now really live without it? Can we really live without the internet? It's like next to impossible. And then talking about the communities who are not in this conversation, who aren't that digitized yet, actually, they also, show us a ray of hope that there are communities, even in this day and age, who are still living without these things. So it's not impossible, when we are thinking about, alternative futures, we can have those on the table.
All right. So perhaps we are ready now for closing remarks from everybody on the panel. Please keep these to maybe 1 or 2 minutes if you can. And if possible, because we did not address explicitly one of the questions and only addressed another in part from the Q&A, if you could also speak about the role of regulation, perhaps, in some of these questions that you brought up. And there was also a comment about bias and the extent to which bias in AI creeps into our decisions, and is there a connection to regulation there? So more or less open-ended, but if you could comment on bias and on regulation, that would be great. So let's just go maybe first to Fai, since he spoke last.
Sure, great. So I would just to restate that we should care about non-human animals, and therefore we should care about the impact of AI on non-human animals. And we should also not forget about a seemingly trivial fact that exactly 0 non-human animals would participate in the development or even the conversation or feedback about AI. We don't need to think about, okay, they designing the system. They actually won't even tell us that AI systems are harming them because they don't understand what AI is. So it's totally on us to take care of them and think about, okay, what kinds of impact our technology will have on them. They completely have to rely on us. So that's probably my only closing remarks. And I will take on the bias question by typing.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Marta next, please.
Well, regulation is precisely what we are looking at. At CIDOB, we are very interested in mapping all those regulations bottom up from cities around the world. We are very interested to bring more cities from the global south, aligned with the question that Stefan posed to us. We need more research on that direction. So I would invite, if anyone is looking at this panel that is doing research in the global south or is coming from the global south and has particularly cases that they want to share with us, we will be super happy to take them into consideration in our research.
Great. Let's go to Viviana, and thank you, Marta, in advance for translating.
Vivian, algunos comentarios para cerrar. Creo que está muteada. Sí, no escuchamos. Ahora.
Pacto global significa pacto planetario. Y lo que desarrollará justamente es la acción colaborativa y una nueva comprensión de los fenómenos de la naturaleza y de la interacción que hay entre el humano, la máquina y el planeta. Y desarrollará competitividad sustentable y responsabilidad cívica. Por eso es que no se relaciona con la parte de globalización, sino que es un pacto planetario, nunca antes hecho por el ser humano. Por eso es que para hacerlo hay que cambiar de paradigma.
She wants to emphasize that a global pact should be translated more as a planetary pact. So with this idea of planetary, you don't have this you don't have this connection with the globalization discourse that we were commenting. So this planetary pact, in fact, would unfold or would unleash collaborative action between humans, planets, and machines, and this is something completely new because the humans had not done a similar pact before.
Thank you very much. And let's go to Amana for her closing statement.
I think I have already spoken a lot, yeah, I would say that it just makes one optimistic, you know, that when we are together and we are talking about these things, and and so many insights are shared and understandings are shared, so it gives us a lot of hope in, you know, moving forward, and, you know, having more people on board, affecting the kind of, you know, positive change that we all aspire for, I think. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Stefan, over to you to close us.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Julia, also for always being such a great partner in those exercises. And thanks to all the panelists, Viviana, Marta, Faye, and Amana, for really sharing your wisdom here. And I think the whole idea behind the course and those panels is to really indeed push ourselves to go beyond some of the current conversations. And from my point of view, we can only do this by actually bringing in different points of view and different perspectives. And I clearly have learned a lot today. I'm anyway still processing a lot of the interventions made, but I do see the value of having those conversations by really opening up the conversation, both from a theoretical, but then also from a practical point of view. What does it mean then in practice? But also, anyway, not shy away from the broader conversations about morals, about, anyway, different paradigms. And I think we need a lot more of that. And I hope that the participants today learned as much as I did. And I'm deeply grateful for you all to join. And I hope you will visit our website, aiethicscourse.org, to learn more if any of this has sparked an interest or stimulated your thinking. Thanks so much, and be well and have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.